Hello again, everyone. This is Rock the Bar, here as always, seeking the truth. And once again, I have another brother in the truth who's going to be bringing forth the biblical scriptures as I'm going over the commentary for the lesson today. Go ahead and introduce yourself, brother.
My name is Brother Terrell. I'd like to give all praise to the Most Higher, for Hashem Messiah, for the walk of God, and just continue to seek truth, and truth will make you free.
That's right. All praises. Thank you, the Most High. Now, the lesson topic that I'm going to be going in today is going to be a topic that probably a lot of people are going to feel very sensitive about, and it's the holiday of Mother's Day and Father's Day. Now, there's not a specific scripture in the Bible that teaches for or against Mother's Day or Father's Day as a holy day, but when you go into the origin of these days and find out why we celebrate these days, there are biblical scriptures that go in and tell us that why we should stay away from these days. Now, it is a common moral belief that everyone has that we all should honor and respect our parents. Regardless of one's religious or spiritual beliefs, this is something that people in all societies typically can agree on. Now, the scriptures even go as far as to list it as a commandment for us to honor our fathers and our mothers. This is going to bring us to our first scripture. It's coming from the book of Exodus, chapter 20, verse 12. Go ahead and read that for me, please, brother.
All right, this is the book of Exodus, chapter 20, verse 12. Honor thy father and thy mother, that their days may be long upon the land, which the Lord thy God giveth thee.
So the scriptures tell us to honor thy father and thy mother. Now, there's another scripture that tells us, again, the same thing. It's going to go to the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 5, verse 16.
This is the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 5, verse 16. Honor thy father and thy mother, as the Lord thy God hath commanded thee, that thy days may be prolonged, and that it may go well with thee in the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee.
So it's clear that we're supposed to honor our father and mother. But the question is how and when do we honor our parents? We honor our father and mother by doing what is right and pleasing to them, and by showing them respect at all times. This should not be regulated or highlighted just on one day out of the year. The custom of honoring a specific individual or a deity one day out of the year is a heathenistic tradition that was practiced by the Gentiles. The scripture tells us that we should not follow after the customs or the traditions of the other nations. The next scripture is going to be in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 18, verse 9.
This is the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 18, verse 9. When thou art come into the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee, thou shalt not learn to do after the abomination of those nations.
So the Most High tells us that we were not supposed to learn the abominations of those other nations. Those abominations were the different practices and customs that those nations taught. Again, another scripture is the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 12, verse 30.
It's the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 12, verse 30. Take heed to thyself, that thou be not snared by the following them, after that they be destroyed before thee, and that thou inquire not after their gods, saying, how did these nations serve their gods? Even so will I do likewise.
So the scripture is telling us that we should not do and serve our God the way that the other nations serve their gods. Or we should not, again, do the same practices as they did. Nowhere in the Bible are we commanded to dedicate a special day to honor our mothers or our fathers. So where did this tradition or custom come from? Just like all other holidays that our people celebrate, the origins of Mother's Day can be traced back to ancient pagan worships in Greece and in Rome. The names of the gods worshipped may have been changed, but the concept is still the same. In ancient Rome, as early as 250 BC, they honored Sibyl as Magna Martyr, which means Great Mother. In ancient Greece, they honored Rhea as the mother of the gods. Even prior to that in Egypt, they honored Isis, who was also known as Set. Now the mother goddess was also commonly referred to as the Queen of Heaven, and she was always worshipped during the spring solstice. This is why Mother's Day always falls in the second Sunday of May, which is typically bringing in the beginning of spring. The worship of a female deity was common amongst the other nations, and over time Israel also began to worship these gods. Proof of that is coming from the book of Acts, chapter 9, verses 24 through 28. Again, the next scripture is coming from the book of Acts, chapter 19, verses 24 through 28. Go ahead and read that when you're ready, brother.
All right, it's the book of Acts, chapter 19, verse 24. It says, "For a certain man named Demetrius, a silversmith, which made silver shrine for Diana, brought no small gain unto the craftsmen." Verse 25. "Whom he calls together with the workmen of like occupation, and said, Sirs, ye know that by this craft we have our wealth."
So I just want to emphasize that so far this is just showing that there were men in Israel that were making wealth by worshiping a goddess named Diana. Continue reading.
Verse 26. "Moreover, ye see and hear that not alone in Ephesus, but almost throughout all Asia, this Paul hath persuaded and turned away much people, saying that they be no gods which are made with hands."
And Paul is coming in during this time to tell them, the people that were making wealth by making things for this goddess Diana, Paul was correcting them and saying that this is not a god. Continue.
Verse 27. "So that not only this our craft is in danger to be set at naught, but also that the temple of the great goddess Diana should be despised, and her magnificence shall be destroyed, whom all Asia and the world worship."
Wait, who all worship it?
Asia
Asia and who?
and the world worship.
Continue.
Verse 28. "And when they heard these sayings, they were full of wrath, and cried out, saying, Great is Diana of Ephesus," of the Ephesians.
Mm-hmm. So this scripture is showing that even during the time of Paul, all people were worshiping the mother goddess by the name of Diana. Now in the Old Testament, this same goddess is called Astra. We can find the worship of this goddess going back in the scripture, the book of Judges. Book of Judges, chapter 10, verse 6.
This is the book of Judges, chapter 10, verse 6. "And the children of Israel did evil again in the sight of the Lord, and served Baalim and Ashtaroth, and the gods of Syria, and the gods of Zidon, and the gods of Moab, and the gods of the children of Ammon, and the gods of the Philistines, and forsook the Lord and served not him."
So this Astra was a goddess of the Gentiles that was worshipped by many different names. And more importantly, she was called the mother or the queen of heaven. We can find her being referred to as the queen of heaven in the book of Jeremiah. Next scripture is going to come from the book of Jeremiah, chapter 44, verses 15 through 17. Now remember, this is still talking about the same God that was called Diana in the New Testament and Ashtaroth in the Old Testament. Continue.
Right. This is the book of Jeremiah, chapter 44, verse 15. "Then all the men which knew that their wives had burned incense to other gods, and all the women that stood by, a great multitude, even all the people that dwelt in the land of Egypt, and Pathros answered Jeremiah, saying," verse 16, "As for the word that thou hast spoken to us in the name of the Lord, we will not hearken unto thee." Verse 17. "But we will certainly do whatsoever thing go forth out of our own mouth to burn incense unto the Queen of heaven, and to pour out drink offerings unto her, as we have done, we and our fathers, our kings, and our princesses in the cities of Judah, and in the streets of Jerusalem. For then had we plenty of victuals, and all well, and saw no evil."
So through this, we can see that the worship of the mother goddess or queen of heaven was a Gentile or pagan tradition. It wasn't until after the Romans tried to Christianize pagan holidays that the same worships of the Queen of Heaven were passed on to Mary as and the mother of Christ. It wasn't until during the 1600s that the Roman Catholic Church actually expanded the worship of Mother's Day and the holiday to supposedly give honor to Mary, that they expanded it to the worship of all mothers. Father's Day, as we know it, is a fairly more recent concept, but it also still has its pagan origins. Father's Day, as we know it today, was only created to complement the widely accepted Mother's Day holiday. But Father's Day actually originates from the worship of the so-called Sky Father. In mythology, the Sky Father is a term for the god who is commonly known as the father of the gods. The Greeks called him Zeus. The Romans called him Jupiter or Saturn. And the Egyptians called him Osiris or Asar. Now, much like Mother's Day falls around during the spring solstice, Father's Day falls around the summer solstice. But a particular fact about both days is that they both are always celebrated on a Sunday instead of one particular day out of the year. Father's Day falls on the third Sunday in June. In pagan beliefs, the god of the sun is considered the most powerful god of them all, and his day of worship was designed as the first day of the week. This is where the name Sunday originates from. So even celebrating Mother's Day and Father's Day on the first day of the week is a form of sun worship, which is giving honor to another god. This is exactly what the Most High forbids us to do. He tells us this in the book of Exodus chapter 20, verse 3.
It's the book of Exodus, chapter 20, verse 3. Thou shalt not have no other gods before me.
So the Most High's command is that we should not have any other gods before him. Before can also mean in his face or against him. So we should be worshiping no other gods other than the Most High himself. Now, most people say that they are not worshiping another god just because they are acknowledging their parents on a certain day of the week. They will say that it's just a tradition. The problem, though, is that this is a Gentile tradition that was created by men in order to honor their gods. This was not an Israelite custom or a law given to us by the Most High. Now, what does the Bible say about following traditions of men? We'll find this out in the book of Matthew, chapter 15, verse 3.
This is the book of Matthew, chapter 15, verse 3. But he answered and said unto them, why do ye also transgress the commandment of God by your tradition?
So Christ is asking us a question. Why do we transgress, as in break, the commandments of God? By what? By doing traditions. The traditions of men are actually going against the scriptures. That's what Christ is telling us. He says it again, it's brought up again in the book of Colossians. Next scripture is the book of Colossians chapter 2, verse 8.
It's the book of Colossians chapter 2, verse 8. Be aware lest any man spoil you through philosophy and vain deceit, after the tradition of man, after the rudiments of the world, and not after Christ.
So here we were warned that we should not be swayed through philosophy or through the traditions of men. Christ himself told us that the following traditions of men is a sin. That's because by celebrating these traditions, we are unknowingly still giving honor to these other gods. We do not need a man-made holiday to honor and respect our parents. That is something that we should do all the time. This then leads to one last problem. What if your mother or your father actually wants to be reverenced on this day? Should we do something that goes against the Most High just because it makes our parents happy? Let's see what Christ has to say. Next scripture and the last scripture is going to come from the book of Luke, chapter 14, verse 26.
This is the book of Luke, chapter 14, verse 26. If any man come to me and hate not his father and mother and wife and children and brethren and sisters, yea, and his own life also, he cannot be my disciple.
So Christ here is not telling us to literally hate our mothers or our fathers. He is simply showing that our love for him and the Most High needs to be greater than our love for our parents or even ourselves. So we can show love and respect and honor our parents any day and every day of the year. But we don't need to acknowledge a holiday that was originally created to worship another God. Now, I hope that this video brought you some insight and some clarity on the worship of Mother's Day and Father's Day. And again, you don't have to take my word for it. I always encourage people to go out and do your own research on the origins of things to find out exactly why you do them, and then see if that coincides with the scriptures. If you like the video, please feel free to hit like, subscribe to my page for other videos, and look forward to the playlist and go into a lot of different topics. But for now, I want to again thank my brother for Terrell for reading for me. Thank you, brother.
You're welcome, bro.
And again, no matter what you do, don't forget to always seek the truth. Shalom.
Shalom.